County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Andy H. Wynn, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3. J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Commissioner Fickus is not here today. He had been here earlier, but he had a close friend who passed away in his services this morning, and so that's why Commissioner Fickus is missing today. Our invocation today will be delivered by Chaplain McDuffie. Thank you for coming out. Turn off that mic.
Yes, sir.
After the prayer, we'll do our pledges to the flag.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we pause today just to say thank you. We realize a lot of times our feet hit the floor and we fail to even thank you for allowing us to get up one more time.
Yes.
But Father, since we're here today, we want to thank you for all of the safety measurements that have been put in place for our schools. We realize that it requires that the whole community will come together to make sure that we keep our children safe. But Lord, thank you for the part that Tarrant County has played in this. Now, Lord, we just ask that you continue to bless this court. Continue to bless this county. Bless the residents down here, Lord, our extended stay on Lamar Street and thereabout. We call them our inmates. But Lord, we pray for the ones that protect them, the one that serves them, the one that guards them day in and day out. But Lord, I continue to pray that you will continue to bless each and every one of us that work for Tarrant County, that will continue to lift you up in spirit and everything that we do. Father, in whatever way that we praise you, we ask this right now in our attitude and in our moral compass as we go about doing the work of this county. And Lord, I can't stop without praying for our sheriff department. Father, that you will continue to protect the officers that hit the street. Continue to bless the deputies as they put on that badge every day and get in that car and go out and serve and protect. Lord, I thank you. It's in Jesus' name I pray and ask it all. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Chaplain.
Yes, sir.
Judge, may I make an announcement at the appropriate time?
You bet. Mr. Manius, would you like to do our agenda announcements?
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, members of the court, we have two announcements relating to the agenda and then one general announcement. First of all, when we get to the briefing section this morning, we are going to have some budget-related issues that we're going to discuss with you. Second of all, on the briefing, we also have the hospital district's budget. And you might remember that the last time Mr. Early was supposed to address the court, he took off on us. So we've asked security deputies to make sure that we block the back door this time. In fact, we put his picture on our internet as one of the wanted people, and so they will stop him. Then finally, want to make an announcement. We are losing one of our department heads at the end of this week. Bill Riley is retiring as the Director of Transportation Services. Bill? We tried to convince him not to retire, but apparently they've had enough rain in East Texas that he's got some water under his boat dock, so he's going to move to the lake for a while.
He launched the boat.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Honor.
Bill, we appreciate you. Bill had a great career with TxDOT prior to coming here, and we appreciate your service to Tarrant County as well as the state of Texas. So thank you very, very much.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Brooks, I believe you had an announcement. Or
I do. On Friday, September 7th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, we will be having the rededication of the Dion Phillips Bagsby Southwest Sub Courthouse. I particularly want to invite my colleagues on Commissioners Court to be present that morning, and sundry of you, everyone is invited. Come and celebrate the finishing of that project and help us celebrate former Commissioner Dion Bagsby as well. 10 o'clock in the morning, September 7th, at the Dion Phillips Bagsby Southwest Sub Courthouse on Granbury Road, 6551 Granbury Road.
Will there be food?
There will be food.
I'm asking on behalf of Mr. Wilder.
There will be
That makes
food.
sense.
Though there's no budget for such things.
In there.
I
Yeah.
ask for your prayer for Deputy Constable Mel Gonzalez from Constable Precinct 2. On his way to work yesterday, he encountered a very bad accident, and he's in bad shape. He is currently in good hands at JPS, so I ask that you keep him and his family in your prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of August the 21st.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. You have before you the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Mendes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have 4 additional items to bring to you this morning. The first, we're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve a master services and purchasing agreement between the county and Axum Enterprise for Evidence.com digital storage of video and audio recordings from Taser Axum body cameras. This is for Constable Precinct 7.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, we can go to item number 2. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court approve interim funding for the continuation of the District Attorney's Protective Order Unit. This is a grant program, and this is not unusual for the state to be somewhat slow on completing the grant process. We believe we'll get the funding. This is for a 90-day period, an amount not to exceed $11,500.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the Court, on item number 3, this also is a request for interim funding. This is for the 323rd Family District Court for the Family Drug Court Program. Same situation. It's a state grant. We believe we'll be getting the funds. This is for a 90-day period with an amount not to exceed $11,250.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Finally, members of the Court, on item number 4, this is a request from the Hospital District. We're requesting that the Commissioners Court concur and approve with the 4th modification of an office lease agreement between the Hospital District and Andrews Dillingham Properties for a building which is located at 501 West Main Street in Arlington, Texas.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Tidwell.
We have 2 items we're asking the court to consider this morning. The first is to receive and file the quarterly investment report for the period ending June 30th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
And our other item is to ask the court to receive and file the Tarrant County financial statements for the period ended July 30th, 2018.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Isles. Welcome, sir. We don't see you often. which I'm predicting is a good thing.
I try to keep my head down when I can. So, members of the court, we're requesting interim funding for the Rise and Direct Court program. We've applied for governor's office funding. A resolution was approved last week. We have every reason to believe that the funding will be approved. We're just in that interim process. So.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Love that fishy tie.
The saltwater root's coming out.
Ms. Glenn. Whoops. Ange.
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our other item this morning is a request for the approval of fiscal year 2019 compensation recommendations. Before I get started, would anybody like a paper copy of the attachment?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to skip the first page of the recommendations because that's exactly the same as we've talked about in the past. There's nothing new on that first page with all the bullet points, so I'm just going to move forward to the second page. This second page hasn't actually changed either, but what does change are the following two pages. So the cost of the recommendations that you see there, we have updated our census in the budget system, or I should say budget has, not we. And so the cost there is a little bit updated on that third page. It's a little bit lower, mostly related to non-law enforcement structure. What we do have on the fourth page is one additional recommendation. This comes from the law enforcement group, a joint recommendation given to us last week by the Sheriff's Office and the Law Enforcement Association. So the four options that you see there, the first one is Cornberry's recommendation. That hasn't changed. We did not recost or reevaluate the cost of this plan. It would have been relatively minor and wasn't worth the work effort, really. The second column there is the law enforcement's recommendation that you've already seen. This is the one that they presented in relation with, or in conjunction with, a certification pay proposal. You'll see that we actually have the cost estimate for that certification proposal now. That is the proposal that provides for $50 for intermediate, $75 for advanced, and $100 for master certification. So the additional cost of that plan is approximately $340,000 annually. So that, in conjunction with their first recommendation, is their first proposal. The second proposal, which you see now, is a third column, law enforcement recommendation 2. That is the recommendation without considering certification pay. So the law enforcement recommendation 1, certification pay, is sort of a combined request. And if that won't be considered, they're asking for recommendation number 2. Our proposed recommendation...
So this would allow them to get the money regardless of...
That's correct. The funds are...
Well, no,
That's cute.
The first one, the first recommendation would, as I read that, I think, would give a total of $4.4 million, and under law enforcement 2, would it be 4? It'd still be 4.4 because the 476 would stay in place, right? If we didn't do anything.
Yes.
Okay.
Our proposed recommendation is in the last column. That hasn't changed other than the cost, again, due to census, has decreased very slightly. But that is still our proposal, along with no change in certification pay. And we are seeking your approval or questions or comments.
Okay, so
You might remember that last week, as we discussed this particular issue, that one of the things that the Commissioners Court was interested in was that we increase the amount that we pay for our jailers a little bit compared to what Korn Ferry had recommended. I believe we went from 3.5% to 4% to ensure that we would remain competitive with the region as it relates to confinement. And correct me, if I'm wrong, but this recommendation too was something we simply received this week.
That's correct. We received it on Thursday.
And we went up, as I'm looking at Korn Ferries in comparison, we also went up beginning at 54, which are 54s, are those the sergeants?
Yes.
So we took the sergeants, the next group up, the 54, 55, 56, and moved them above what Korn Ferry was recommending from that standpoint.
That's
and
correct.
That's in line with the second proposed amounts that did. And then on the 57 through 60, we did what law enforcement originally had recommended.
Correct.
At staff level, we still believe that the proposal and the recommended proposal that we had discussed last week would be the one we would recommend to the court.
That last column?
Yes, sir.
And then in addition to that, if we go with the raising all levels to $60 from the $50, that would increase that to about 4.15 million in total compensation.
Okay, the two
And you
columns.
got a puzzled look on your face.
When you say 4.1, you're talking about the certification
What I'm
pay
doing
for
is I'm
60?
taking the proposed numbers that GK just gave us, which totals $3,588,000. And then I'm adding, and then I'm
I see, the total
agreeing
cost.
to the 60, or I'm looking at the $60 for all levels as
Gotcha.
opposed to having to go through that. If you add those two numbers together, you get 4,156,000 something.
So the question becomes, Ange, is the current certification pay that we currently utilize, is it embedded in the 3.5?
It is not.
Okay,
It is
so-
not. Okay. So which certification pay structure are we using? The tier level or the same?
We have $50 for all tiers right now, for all
$50 for
certification
tier,
levels.
right?
And I think some of the concern there was trying to keep up with moving from one to the next to the next.
It's part of the concern, yes.
Well, let's try this motion in two parts. I move approval of the proposed recommendations on structure adjustments.
Proposals?
The proposed recommendation, the fourth column to the right, the staff's proposed recommendation.
I'll second it. Discussion?
Is this gonna create additional compression problem among the various positions?
It could cause some compression between the 51s and the 52s. That'll be the the bigger area. It's going to increase a little bit on the top end as well. The 51s are just really where we need staff and where we have the vacancies. The 52s, when we've looked at the structure there, have largely been
Yeah, I mean, the 52, the 51s
Well
are your
seated.
that's your jailers. Come on forward, Sheriff. And I think that's where, when we looked in comparison to the other counties that they were comparing to, that we were falling behind. And so we felt like it was important to look at those jailers. Sheriff?
I agree with the jailer's proposal there. The concern is with compression with the 52s and the 53s, quite frankly, because the 53 is your road deputy. And as far as the current survey that we do, I don't know if it encompasses some of our strongest competition is going to be our municipalities at the 60 and 70,000 population level, i.e. in Mansfield or North Richland Hills. And, their starting pay is around $60,000 these days. So we're
Most of the
about
time, don't they
50
require degrees, and they're looking only for patrol officers?
They're looking for patrol officers is correct. Degrees it varies. Some still just have high school, some 30 hours, some 40 hours, some none.
Okay.
So, and I believe Mansfield right now is none, just offhand. But we made that law enforcement recommendation last week due to the fact that we saw that the certification pay was not going to be very acceptable, and we saw that. And so we made a recommendation. What we'd really like to see is that the 51s, 52s, and 53s certainly get that 4% if at all possible. And we'd love for everything in that recommendation to be done. But at that lower end of 51s, 52s, and 53s, 4% sure would be advantageous to help retention.
What are your higher end, or what are your minimums? And the reason I say it is because Korn Ferry came back, originally their total was coming to 3.2. And we said we wanted to up that a little bit. And the proposed goes, the law enforcement recommendation takes that up by 25%.
Total, yes, sir.
And before we do the certification increase.
Right.
And so that was, the proposed recommendation goes up about 10%, a little more than 10%, I think. So that's why I felt good about that. Now, give me under the proposed deal, what's the max pay for, right now, what's the max pay for your 51?
Today or under the proposal?
Either one.
Under the proposal, the max pay for a 51 will be about $51,400.
And what's the midpoint on the 52s?
It would be about $50,900.
And what's the max on the 52s?
About $59,000.
And that's with the 3% proposal.
Correct.
Okay. And the 53, what's the max on the 53 with the 3% proposal?
It would be about $70,900.
So, I mean,
And 53s are now you're at the peace officer level, the patrol officer. So you have
so they're going to get certification too because they're a peace officer, aren't they?
actually, they'll get certification, plus the jailer gets certification also.
Okay.
Yeah, $50.
I will just note, I've looked at the structure adjustments that we've done over the past 5 years. If you remember, in 2014, we took the law enforcement structures, and I always say we kind of blew them up and started over because we were concerned about compression. And with our proposals, the staff proposals for this year, the 51s and the 53s will have increased by 14% in the last 5 years. So it equates it. It didn't, from 2014, make the compression issue any worse between the 51s and the 53s. And we'll acknowledge that the 52s have only gone up by 12.5%. So the 51 to the 53 doesn't seem as big of an issue as, in theory, the 51s to the 52s.
And the 52, who are in your 52 positions?
Mostly dispatchers.
Security specialist.
Yeah, there are some security positions.
And the dispatchers, if I might even recall, that salary compared to other dispatchers across police departments, we were substantially higher. And of course, the one thing staff also looked at is that from law enforcement recommendation number 2 to what we had proposed, that's another $500,000 that the revenue is not there to cover that right now. So we'll have to open up the budget again to find cuts in order to pay for that. These expenditures then become part of an ongoing escalating cost to the county. That's why we thought that it was very fair, because what we talked about the last time, a proposed recommendation, was better than what Korn Ferry had done, plus what we have done in the last 5 years for the bottom rungs of the Sheriff's Department. We thought that would be a good adjustment that would keep our pay to law enforcement on a progressive level.
I think staff has done a good job of thinking this through. My motion stands.
Yeah, and I mean, I really think that we're, like I said, Corn Ferry was already giving an increase in there. We've increased that by an additional 10% on our proposal, on the proposal from staff. And then in addition to that, we're fixing to do about a 20% increase probably if we approve the increase from the 50 to the 60 in the certification pay.
Judge Whitley, if I'm understanding, you're proposing the increase also in certificate pay?
That's where I'm leaning right now.
Okay, thank you.
But that's the next motion.
I understand.
Any further discussion on this particular motion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Now, do you have another motion, or are you through?
Oh, sure, why not?
Well, I didn't know if anybody else was going to hop in there, or
Feel free. I move approval of the $60 for all level per month certification pay.
I'll second it.
I like the idea of a tier. It encourages our deputies to advance their education.
Absolutely.
I just don't like the additional cost.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Property owners in Texas and in Tarrant County have complained enough, very loud and clear, that we need to hold their property taxes down as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to somehow create a tier system because it's really advanced the education level and encourages the deputies to do so.
Absolutely.
But somehow we can figure out a way to keep that cost down. That will make more sense in the long run. So if you lower the INT level a little bit, the lower level, and then lower the middle level, and somehow create a tier but keep the cost low, I think that would be ideal for me.
We can certainly look at that. Unfortunately, public safety, like medical cost and like fire cost across the nation, has just exploded on this very competitive, organizations. Fort Worth is the only people in the world that is overstaffed. Everybody else is, I think Dallas is down by 600 people and so forth like that. It's just a very competitive field.
I understand.
And and certainly, you maintain standards for every 100 people that apply for the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office. We're only going to hire 4 of those, and because of our standards, we don't want to compromise standards with lower pay or anything like that. Understand it's just a highly competitive field, and we're competing with everybody.
Gotcha.
Thank you for listening.
Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Jack, you don't even get a chance to come up here and talk this morning before Robert. No. I'm not inviting you. I was just making a comment. Are there any appointments today? Being none, then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor.
He's still here.
That's why I look back there. We have 2 items to bring to you this morning. The first is the hospital district's fiscal year 2019 proposed budget presentation. Mr. Early is here to begin the discussions.
I had no idea the court went this long. Happy to be here.
Obviously.
No idea. Thank you, and I want to, in advance, thank for the consent calendar. It's really nice, and who was allowed to be up here. I'm grateful. A couple things that I did want to say. I want to thank Steve Montgomery and Charlie Powell, who are in the audience today, and the other board members who spent a great deal of time on this budget. When you get over $40 million in the last couple of years reduction from federal funding, you have to be smart about how you put a budget together and how you put that budget together and not adversely affect patients and patient services is a delicate, difficult task. And we've got a really good board that you all appointed to help us with that. And accolades to Steve Montgomery as the finance chair. He signed up to be a board member. He didn't sign up to be with us every day. And he's pretty much with us every day. And
this is his second tour of duty, too, by the way.
It is a second tour of duty, and we are grateful for Mr. Montgomery's leadership in the Finance Committee, as well as Mr. Petty and some of the others, including some of our past chairs, which includes Charlie Powell, as past chair of Finance. And Mr. Powell's banking experience and what he brings to the table is good. And I wanted to comment to y'all that the diversity at which you've put on our board makes a better budget. The diversity of people that have a concentric kind of view towards patients and the people that they represent, the people that have a business acumen that they bring to the table and helped us to put a budget together is really what made this budget possible. To that point, Sharon Clark and her team. Our budget at JPS, with the extensive nature of it and the complexity of it, is very much like painting the San Francisco Bay Bridge. You start on one end and you paint the bridge, and when you get done, you start on the other end and you go back and paint the bridge. So after the aspects of when the budget is passed, Sharon and her team will take their traditional 3-hour break, and then they will go back and start on next year's budget. We were going to reduce that to 2 hours, but we decided to be philanthropic in our nature. So she will have a 3-hour break, and that team will go ahead and start the next time dealing with the budget. We received a unanimous vote from our board, and that also is nice, although we don't always expect unanimous votes, and not having unanimous vote does not mean discontent. It just means somebody may have an opinion that we have and hold different. But we were able to receive a unanimous vote, and we're proud of that because that took a lot of effort from a lot of people. I want to thank you all for your input and your suggestions. So what I'd like to do is have Sharon come up and spend a few minutes going through some of the highlights of our budget and go through some of the material that we have previously sent to you all for you all to review and see. I want to also thank Mr. Manius and his staff, particularly that he's not here. I want to tell everybody how incredible of a person he is and how fantastic G.K. Manius is. But his staff has actually been quite helpful for us as we've worked through the budget. And having him play a significant part in helping us has been a benefit.
Don't take offense to GK's absence. He's just doing what you did last week.
I understand. I want to set the example, and I want to raise the bar high. So what I want to do is have Sharon come up and give you some of the details, and then any other questions you all have.
Before you leave,
Yes, sir.
last week, I believe you were in Nashville. You drove to Nashville, as we all know you would.
Yes, sir.
And you were bestowed or awarded the 2018 Firestarter Hall of Fame. You were inducted into the Firestarter Hall of Fame by the Studer Group, which is a group that is known for efficiencies and stuff in all things. And so we certainly want to congratulate you. I know that Charlie and several of your staff went and surprised you. Yeah, that would probably help if it was plugged in, wouldn't it? We're trying to figure out why I'm not working here, and Andy has unplugged me.
I did not.
Don't pull it too much further here. Now, JD's over here just laughing away because my computer isn't working. So, but congratulations for an award well deserved, and we appreciate everything you've done to help JPS in this community. And I think that award just is indicative of exactly how much you have accomplished. So
Thank you. I
congratulations.
appreciate that.
What's the fire starter award?
Go ahead and tell us what a fire starter
It's an arsonist.
It is. It is.
We lifted the burn ban, and here you go.
And here I go. It was a kind award. They provide that to internationally to 4 people. That is
Internationally?
Yes, sir. And that is provided to 4 people each year. I believe this is their 16th year to do it. And they pick people in the healthcare industry that have been innovative with their programs and have taken their organizations from a place of challenge to a place of higher performance. And I was honored. However, I was the recipient, but it is given to 6,500 folks that work at JPS. I just happened to be lucky enough to pick up the award, but it was given to JPS.
Is it the same student group? Is it the same organization that gave us a set of recommendations
Yes, sir.
earlier, which have yet to be implemented?
Yes, sir.
I see. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we need to consider that, right, Mr. Powell?
Well, they still thrown enough of him that they put him in the Hall of Fame even after that, so.
So thank you. I appreciate that. You're very kind. Ms. Clark.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Don't want to hit this. Okay. So today I have our 2019 budget, as Robert had mentioned. This is the draft that actually is recommended to you by our Board of Managers. Definitely the largest challenge this year was the fact that we continue to see declines in our federal funding. These are supplemental programs that help with our self-pay as well as our Medicaid patients. This is a 5-year trend. There are 2 columns there for fiscal year 18. But between 18 and 19 budget, we're going to see about a $13.3 million decline in these programs as more people are allowed entry into the fixed dollars of the pool. And that did create, as I mentioned, a significant challenge for us during the 19 budget. However, a lot of numbers on the page, but I want to draw your attention to the right-hand column and the bottom number. Even after the $13 million decline, we were able to budget a break-even bottom line. Just as a reminder, our system is comprised of 3 separate operating companies. The health network encompasses the mental health aspect that we do, our community health, as well as the inpatients that we serve. Acclaim is an organization that's comprised of over 450 physicians and providers that see those patients, including the ones that are qualified for our Connection program within the walls of JPS, and of course our foundation. And I'm going to cover those in a little bit more detail. And please interrupt me if you have any questions. I'll be happy to answer those along the way. So we've talked about the federal funding challenge. We also expect about a 9.8% increase in our ad valorem revenue. That is about a 5.1% effective tax rate increase this year. We put up money through an intergovernmental transfer for many of our Tarrant County partners in healthcare. We have a new mechanism to do that this year. It's called the URIP program, and we will be under a full year impact of that program. We were able to find 9 additional inpatient beds this year by converting 9 rooms into double occupancy rooms, which will help us with some of our volume issues. We're beginning our mobile mammography screening in 19, so we will be able to not only provide mammography at the traditional locations, but we can do it at almost every community health center. We are expanding our 340B pharmaceutical program to our retail partners, which will allow further access to lower cost drugs for the district.
Does that cost us any additional money?
Just the only additional cost, it's actually net revenue for us. So it's additive to our bottom line. The only additional cost is the cost of the drug itself.
I see.
We also have our Northeast Medical Home opening in October, so we hope to see all of you there at that opening. We're very excited about that. And we continue to benchmark our costs and continue focusing on rev cycles so that we can collect from those patients that do have insurance and payer sources. The medical center income statement, again, a lot of numbers, but if you'll look at that second column about midway down, the point I was trying to make with this slide is that before the $13.3 million of federal funding loss, we would have produced about a 2% margin on the medical center, or $20 million. We did go ahead and budget for that decline, and our operating margin is $6.8 million this year, or about 0.7%, with a bottom line of $23 million for the medical center. Our volumes are not changing a whole lot. We are seeing a little bit of inpatient growth with those additional beds, and our urgent care, primary care, and specialty clinic volumes continue to grow. Our revenue sources are fairly unchanged. We do collect the largest part of our dollars from patients with insurance. So 43% of our total revenue comes from commercial insurers, Medicare, and Medicaid. Approximately 60% of our patients do have insurance, and that's where the blue piece of the pie comes from. We also have a large portion, about 40%, from our ad valorem tax base. And the gray area for DISH, DSRIP, and UC, which is our federal funding sources, has shrunk to about 12% this year. If you look at a 5-year trend, you can kind of follow to see what's happening. We have grown to just over $1 billion worth of operating revenue. And you can see the gray bar is going down in our federal funding. However, we do have pretty significant increases in our patient revenue based on volume increases and improvements that we have implemented in our rev cycle. And we've also had a nice increase along the way from the ad valorem taxes. Our areas of expense, you can see operating expenses, really half of those are simply our labor cost for all of the patient care areas and the support areas. The orange part of the graph is our professional fees, and that represents payments that we are making to physicians for primary care, for specialty care, for in-bed care. And so if you look at that, it's really about 65% is just hands-on labor.
Is that the acclaim? Is a claim in that?
A big portion of that 15% is paid to Acclaim physicians that are employed or contracted with Acclaim. We do have about 3 larger of the coverage contracts that do not run through Acclaim right now, and as those become renewed, they will be redirected as contract labor through Acclaim. So the long-term goal is to get all of the physician management through Acclaim. But we will wait for those contracts to come up. So a large part of Acclaim is employed physicians, but we do have quite a few of our contracted groups that have already gone through renewal that you'll see as contract labor in Acclaim.
Okay.
So about 66% is compensation and payroll and so forth.
Yes, if you include the physicians and their coverage.
That's about
Some of them are,
$660-something million.
correct, yes. So haven't been turning my pages. Yeah, if you look at that, it is a very significant part of our budget. The compensation represents about $500 million, the blue part, and with an additional $158 million for the physician coverage.
And that compensation is salary, benefits, everything that goes along with that.
It is, yes. It's all employee-related cost.
Okay.
Or contract labor. And I'm not going to talk about this, but you can see along with volumes and inflation, our areas of expense have increased as well. The Future Fund is a commitment by our Board of Managers and Administration towards any future facilities that may be needed. To date, we have put $117 million in the fund. Our Board of Managers has voted to increase that by $10 million at the end of this fiscal year. And as you can see, in 19, we have also earmarked already $7 million to be put into the fund.
We have 134.
Let's see, something's going on. Sorry, I flipped 2. Let me get back there.
And I guess my comment, and I've said this before, is that I would really like to look at the days of operations that y'all have. Y'all are very financially sound. But I feel like that might come down a little bit, which would provide more money for the future fund. And as you know, as we're going forward with this, asking the public to come forward and support our bond issue of up to $800 million. That means that y'all are going to be responsible for coming up with somewhere between $300 and $400 million based upon other things that you can do. You've already done that with your cancer, and I applaud you for that. And I know you're looking at other things too from that standpoint. So keep up the good work, but don't spend that cash.
We continually look at it, and that is my goal. So we do our best to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we have the liquidity that we need for future construction as well as operations. Again, the majority of our $40 million capital budget is for patient care equipment, and the IT component of that is really also patient care connectivity and supporting that electronic medical record. Our ad valorem tax assumption in our budget has stayed constant at the 0.224429. And as we move into the discussion of a claim, we have had the growth of about 41 providers over this fiscal year, and that is adding about 6% to our estimated encounters. We are expanding urology, maternal fetal medicine, and our surgical services in the 19 budget. We are transitioning 2 groups of providers into a claim. The dental providers will be coming from JPS, and correctional health will be coming from UNT this year. And as the medical center, we look for continued improvements in our rev cycle as well as better reporting so we can make those operational improvements.
So you're saying that the correctional health providers that are currently at UNT Health Science Center are going to be moving into the claim?
Under an employment status. Right now, they're a contracted group, so we will be transitioning them to an employment. So as you look at this very small claim income statement, really drop your eyes to the bottom 2 lines, and we're looking at the growth in our provider FTEs, so our full-time equivalents. We've gone from about 434 providers to 458. If you look at, which is the way that from a comparative standpoint, we do have MGMA benchmarking from a national average. The per provider loss across the nation median is $158,000. This year with the 458, providers, we're at an average of about 52,000. We will continue to strive to gain operational efficiencies and make sure that we can get that number down, but it is helpful, I think, to try to put that into context. Unless there's any other questions, that is the last prepared remarks that I have for today.
The other operating revenue that you're showing a claim, what is that?
So a lot of that is funding from the JPS Physician Network for coverage. So if you look at the two components that we have for other operating revenue, the first line is everything that we have built and collected from a patient experience. So most of that is insurance collections, Medicare, Medicaid, as well as payment from our Connection program. Other operating revenue includes GME from other sources. Some of our physicians provide coverage at community area hospitals. That also comes back into that area. And some of our medical directorships and just a blanket coverage payment would go into that second line item.
As I'm looking at the JPS Health Network, I see the $52 million in that same category. Is that just representing the doctors that are still, that was slide 4, so that's way back at the beginning. Is that representing the doctors that are still in the JPS side of the deal and haven't moved over to a claim yet?
So let me catch up to make sure that I'm looking at the same number you are. Well,
Okay, now you need to go the other direction. Keep going. Whoop.
Okay, page 7. This is our combined income statement, and you're looking at the $52 million.
Right.
So a lot of that is going to be comprised of, again, GME funding that we receive. It also...
200 plus residents that you have?
Yes, correct. It's also our tobacco revenue is included in that.
No, and that's not down at the bottom?
No, it is not. So the only thing that is in the non-operating revenue is really interest earnings from the cash that we have on hand.
Okay.
So anything that's not patient care related or tax related or the 3 categories of federal funding end up in other operating revenue for the medical center.
Okay.
The physician
Remuneration.
Is that the same thing as professional service?
It is. So that is kind of a medical terminology for just payments that we have made to physicians for coverage. And that, again, a large part of that $158 million that you see is paid to a claim for that coverage. About $50 to $55 million is what we pay for physicians to see our Connection eligible patients in both a primary care and a specialty care setting.
Okay,
so it's over a third of that cost. The other is medical directorships, coverage in the ED, our anesthesiology department, as well as our in-house physicians. Those are other 3 large categories that are not in a claim.
You decrease contract labor and that physician remuneration
Mm-hmm.
by almost a fourth. And how?
The decrease in contract labor, the way that we budget is that we assume a position is going to be filled and would be salary dollars.
Okay.
So any unplanned contract labor is not budgeted for because it is budgeted for effectively in the salary expense line item. So you almost have to look at those together.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so with regards to the physician part of that, is that what you're anticipating transferring over from JPS to a claim?
Yes. Yeah, so a large part of the expense that's budgeted for in the medical center comes into other operating revenue in a claim.
Okay.
Now, claim does have other payer sources in addition to the medical center. So there's the medical center payment, and then we do receive other GME funding and coverage revenue.
I know this is getting way down in the weeds, but that's what I'm known for, so.
It's okay.
True that.
Physician in a claim supervises resident in JPS.
Yes.
And bills for that procedure that the resident did.
Yes, they can do that.
So the money collected as a result of what the resident did, is that revenue in a claim, or is that revenue at JPS?
There's actually two components. So the facility fee
Would be
will
in
go
JPS.
into the JPS column.
Right.
The professional fee for the physician time is actually in a claim.
Okay, that's what I would have expected.
Yes, we don't combine bill in Texas, so.
So we don't bill for the resident service.
Doctor has to, I think the supervising physician can bill for the doctor.
So from the insurer, we bill for the actual supervising physician bills for the resident activity.
Okay.
And then, in your example, the acclaimed physician who is supervising is probably a little bit less efficient because of the training, and he may receive some education funding for his time spent with the residents. So there's two components.
Gotcha.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Just a note for the court as relates to JPS's budget. Next Tuesday, September 4th, we have our second and final public hearing on the budget and on the tax rate for JPS. And then on September 11th, which is 2 weeks from today, we're going to ask the court to vote on or to approve the budget for JPS plus their tax rate.
Just one more question.
Yes, sir.
You stated in the past that your goal is to attain a 2% operating margin. Am I remembering correctly?
Yes, sir. And that was a point to that medical center slide. Before we had been notified of the potential large decrease, that $13.3 million, the medical center would have actually hit a 2% operating margin.
So because of the reduction in the federal funding, we are looking
Went down
at
to 0.7. Correct. So the long-term objective, so when we think about the public facility, and this is my philosophy, it's not necessarily shared by anyone else that's sitting back there, but we're at a fine line of holding on to a bottom line versus provision of services for the community. And anything that is above break even, which keeps us financially sound and the cash flow whole, and a 2% is a range of comfort. There's nothing written in stone about that 2%, but from my standpoint, 0 to 2% is it's not a very big margin at all. And if you recall last year, I think we had budgeted a 0.6% margin.
Which dropped down to be negative 1.7.
Correct. With the $16 million that we'll likely have to pick up for 18. And again, when you look at that combined income statement, I think it's very important to realize that as a system, as a whole, we were able to budget a break even this year.
Right. I want to point that out because JPS is operating on a razor-thin margin.
We do.
And so we rely heavily on the appreciation of the property tax revenue to stay solvent. And that's the reason why it's tough for this body or for me to ask JPS to keep lowering the tax rate. And that's the reason why. Because
Correct.
if we keep doing that, then we'll basically create financial problems for JPS in the long run.
correct. We do have about 40% of our total patient population without any funding source whatsoever.
And I think we're looking at that, the 800 million again, up to 800 million in the bond issue. The 16 million that you're showing or you're projecting for an operating margin loss, and then a net of 4.2 million for JPS also includes about 39 million, almost $40 million worth of depreciation.
Yes, it does.
Which, it's a little bit, that factors into the deal, because that means you didn't spend cash on that, and that money will eventually be used to help pay for the bond and.
Well, and we also have $39 to $40 million worth of maintenance capital every year. So that depreciation savings from cash, you and I are talking accounting now,
Yep.
but that also gets
Helps you with your
spent
capital
on
budgets.
the capital budget. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Which is a lot, which also is what we kind of do at the county.
And again, the way that I have created that funding of the JPS Future Fund, again, is to say we're going to trim down that maintenance capital to save for future facilities. And this year it was $7 million.
Days of operation.
All right.
Good
Thank you
job.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
Mr. Early, anything else you'd like to impart upon us at this time, or? I want to thank.
I'm going to stay for about an hour.
Good. We're going to stick around here. The rest of y'all can go. Mr. Early's got to stay. Charlie, thank you all very much. Steve, for everything y'all do. We appreciate you. Charlie, you're on your first tour of duty. Steve's on his second. But we do very much appreciate it. Bill, thank you also for everything that you do and have done with the group.
Judge, on exception, I'll just say on behalf of the board, thank y'all also. We've been working through a lot with GK and his staff. It's been an ongoing thing, both the budget and the bond numbers. So thank you very much for y'all's support also.
You bet. You bet.
Before we go into the budget,
Actually, it'd be after the budget.
okay, great. We can now go to the second briefing item, which is the FY19 county budget issues update. And I believe Ms. Snyder has, I think that
you have your hand out. The clerk has their copy. I'm actually going to sit down at my chair, if you don't mind. It just makes it a little bit easier for me to walk through it. But we'll get started with the revenues. On the top of your handout, there's a green page. It's not green on your slide here, but we received revenue estimate changes from the auditor's office late last week, and so we want to outline those for you. Of course, we have three funds that we're dealing with that we call our operating funds, and some roll up into others. So in the general fund, we see a slight increase in taxes, and that's because there was an increase in cash carry forward in the debt service, so that just meant that we had to reallocate the tax rate, and resulted in an increase of $149,000. We simply had contract patrol services, the revenue, overstated in the original revenue estimates. There were two increases that were related to the Attorney General contract that we have with the domestic relations, so those items C and D there. Those have been taken into consideration. Investment income was increased in the general fund by $300,000, and cash was increased by $716,200. Now, that's cash, and so you'll see a recommendation specifically for that on the following pages, so we'll come to that in a second. This is what I'm moving. Make sure they can hear me in the back. The Road and Bridge Fund also had a couple of changes. One, again, was investment income, and the other one was the cash carry forward for a total of $845,000. Debt service, we mentioned that caused a ripple effect into the general fund when cash carry forward increased by $150,000. Now, these are our recommended adjustments. First of all, there's a few changes in the compensation allocation based on the final recommendations. There's a small increase we're recommending for our outside audit. We actually missed the increase from the appraisal district, so it's $160,705, and that's an increase that goes out jurisdiction-wide to all the entities in Tarrant County. Historical Commission. I'm sorry.
Okay. So you're saying that Tarrant County's portion of the Tarrant Appraisal District's increase in their budget is $160,000?
That's correct.
Are we a relatively small amount of that budget, or are we a relatively large amount?
I don't want to commit to this right now because I have to go back and look at it. But our current allocation may be under budget, and I'd have to go look at that. I can send you their allocation.
Well, that just seems like a very large amount if it's just the county's portion, unless we sure don't get votes based upon the percentage that we're.
We're probably in the top 5 or 6 jurisdictions in
it's quite
TAD
large.
that we do have a significant amount of votes. We're not the largest entity that has votes, but we're not the smallest one either. We can get you those numbers.
Yeah.
It just seemed like a large number if we're only a portion of that deal. So please check on that.
The rest of this first section here, we're recommending a reduction to the Historical Commission allocation back down to their current level of funding, which is $4,000. But we're moving $10,000 of that was in that allocation into what we're calling county projects, and that's for a specific project for Arlington Heritage Cemeteries. We noted the increase in cash in the general fund, and so we're recommending a transfer to capital projects. In particular, we'll see it down later, it has to do with a project that we've started on the Tim Curry Justice Center. It has to do with the exterior review to power wash, clean, and actually caulk areas because we do have some leaks that are developing. We've already spent about $140,000 on engineering work to assess the actual cost of that project. Those bids have come in recently and they're significantly over budget. And it's not really something we can do in phases because it involves putting scaffolding up all around the building to address some of the major issues. Number two, there was a reclassification added back to the budget. Number 3, 4, 5, and 5 are all related. IT had presented to the commissioners during their budget hearing a request to add additional positions to their budget above and beyond what was recommended. And I think there were 5, is that right? 5 additional? Yes, 5 additional positions. What we've done is work closely with the administrator's office as well as IT to identify internal funding to fund those positions. So there's adjustments throughout the major elements that help accomplish this, that there were 2 vacant positions that are being eliminated. And there's some reduction in what they call staff augmentation and some reductions to software maintenance.
So what is the net on 3, 4, and 5?
It's 0. Well, let me just add that.
But by doing this, we have provided the staffing that the CIO has requested. There was one position that budget had initially funded. There were 2 vacancies that we were able to utilize and reclassify. And then there were 2 that Ms. Snyder's talked about as staff augmentation, which is a capital expenditure. We were able to find funding in the IT budget to fund those 2 positions.
Great.
So actually the adjustments here come up to a negative $6,870, and the balance of that ends up into the salary calculations for increases of structure, stuff like that. So in essence, it is 0.
Okay.
Good job, Debbie.
Sure. Highway IT and GK's office work closely with us on that, so we appreciate that. The next group, which is identified as number 7, you might remember during the budget hearings, we told you.
6 or 7?
I'm sorry. 6. That's just the Armored Car Service bid contract. It came in higher than what budgeted. Overall, it's about a $10,000 difference, 9404. The next, we mentioned that we were still uncomfortable with the council fee allocation that we have out there, that we had in the original budget recommendation for 2019. We've got another 2 months worth of expenditures under our belt, so we've gone back and looked at those closely again. They continue to rise. Our focus was only on expenses since February, looking at when some changes were made to system approaches such as 218 changes, prisoners coming to us sooner, not bonding out from other jurisdictions, and the centralized magistration. Caseloads are up. There's all sorts of dynamics that goes into the cost of counsel fees. But after looking at them again very closely and in great detail, we're recommending an increase of $615,000. We have run through basically most of our council fees are ready for the month for 2018, and we project there's another $1 million worth of expenses that'll happen in September.
And that's a pure unfunded mandate. They told us they were going to pay us, they didn't pay us, and continued not to pay us. They being the state, just in case anybody didn't realize that.
Got it. Number 8, minor adjustment, but we did get some communication from JP Court number 2 requesting for some temporary help relief through approximately June of next year. We worked with them and have funded a temporary back during the summer to help them with days off during vacation time. It's become very, very helpful. They are a high truancy court, so because of a planned retirement in June, this gives them someone there to season up a little bit more, so they might have a natural person to put in that position when their retirement comes. So a minor cost for a big return. This is just kind of informational, number 9 and 10. Right as we were walking in the door for the budget hearings, there was action presented to Commissioners Court, which you approved, to fund half of a new position in the Sheriff's Department and eliminate another one. We're just recognizing that change that happened. It's a zero cost impact. Here's the project that's for $715,000 where we're recommending our use of cash increase for the general fund. It is that project for the Curry building. Moving into Road and Bridge. Whoops, moved too far.
What you say, Curry Criminal Justice Center, $715,000. What is that?
Well, that's what we were talking about. It's sitting over there by itself now because we've moved all the capital out into the capital project fund. So now all the cost is just focused in one place, and that's the transfer from the general fund. So that's why it's kind of a little bit different.
I see what you're saying.
And just a note on that sheet, there were funds that are available, the 109 that did not take into account the $95,000 that the court just approved on the certification pay increases. So you'll need to subtract that amount from that sale. That'll basically give you $14,000. I think it was $95,000.
It was 95 something. Moving into the Road and Bridge Fund, we told you that there was an increase in cash. That was approximately $875,000. I'm sorry, that's wrong, $730,000. There was a small adjustment to compensation allocation in that fund, but at this point in time, we're recommending that cash increase go into and designated in the Road and Bridge Fund. They have a very, very small undesignated, and according to some conversations with the Transportation Department, we're going to have a large payment for some state projects come up in December. And, I mean, we just can't ever really predict well the timing.
What's that going to be, Bill?
It's 156,
156 and something else, or two. Maybe 26?
Mine is 156 north of
Come on up, we can't pick you up on mics.
We don't want you to get away without having to do a little bit more work.
I believe
156 north of Alliance?
It's the one up by the Saginaw High School, south of
Saginaw.
the other Beverly go to construction, so it's some right-of-way acquisition stuff. And the other one, I'm not sure which one it
I
is.
want to say 26, but I'm directionally.
It may be part of the DFW connector, the latest.
It's not 30 or 20, I don't know.
It's our participation.
That part up there that they just had the groundbreaking on.
It keeps ongoing, the ongoing project, yes.
Okay.
So we've got 10% participation on the state facilities up here. To the, as far as on the right of way.
Okay. And
That-
we
it
can't,
may be
we
something
can't
else, I'm not
time that out. We have to pay that.
Now, we predict it, in a lot of years, we don't use it, that's the
Yeah.
reason we have a lot of money. But we need to have it in our budget to pay for it in case they ask us for it.
That's really the fear. We don't really have a lot of margin within that fund. So in the event something comes early as opposed to being delayed, we're really not prepared for that.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the big dollars
When they finally do ask for them sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
So when we left the budget hearings, we had two things that were pending, two departments that had pending issues. One of them was IT, which we've resolved here. So that leaves the sheriff's department. And I feel really, really bad that we had to get the sheriff back in the courtroom. I did not anticipate that he'd leave the room. So, there were three things that the sheriff left on the table for us. We talked about adding a vehicle in lieu of a car allowance for one of their chief positions, and that cost has been resolved. We've taken a higher cost vehicle and another division that was basically $52,000 for a full-size SUV, fully loaded, and looked at what they really needed. It's needed for the judicial operation, who might from time to time have to make arrests downtown, maybe by their foot patrol or in one of our buildings. So talking with Chief Simons, he agreed that a mid-size SUV with a cage and lights and fully marked would work for that situation. So that saved us $20,000, which accommodated the additional vehicle that we were talking about for the sheriff's department. Sheriff's Department has also made it clear that their desire is also, in lieu of vehicles, to use car allowances for up to 6 individuals. Is that correct? We got the names of 4 to 5 of those, with some flexibility still come to the Sheriff's Department if that's the direction we want to go. We attempted to see if we could identify how many business miles these individuals drove in any given period of time. That was difficult to do, since they have long-term been used to and from home also. We did kind of step back and look at 2 individuals, hoping that they didn't change vehicles during the year, and looked at their fuel man account, where every time you use fuel man at a participating gas station, you have to enter your mileage. So we took a look at 2 individuals, looked at their mileage from a year ago and today, factored in number of work days that they were off and holidays, and looked at the distance they lived from home to work. Then got varying information. One had about 6,000 miles worth of business miles, the other one a smaller amount, under 2,000. We looked at a couple other things. We looked at long-term costs of a car allowance versus a car. These cars we predict would last about 10 years. Looking at, again, a couple of these individuals and what their monthly gasoline was, using the number of business miles that we're potentially looking at here, throwing in some repairs over 10 years, the cost came out reasonably close to a car allowance that would equal to about $4,800 a year. Again, based on limited information, that's the best that we could come up with.
So it would be $4,800 a year in car allowance versus giving them a car.
Correct, and there's about, are there 6 vehicles in here, Shira, or 5?
5 in the original budget.
5. So there's $132,000 worth of the initial purchase of vehicles.
Feelings, thoughts? Feelings or thoughts? You got any?
What's the standard allowance rate?
Excuse me?
What's the standard allowance rate? Is there?
I'm not going to say there is a standard.
There's not?
And you know, these mileage rates were looked at many, many years ago, or established many years ago. And we had a policy in place at one time that increased it as the mileage rates changed. But in 2009, that was stopped when the mileage rates increased significantly and then came back down dramatically. So they range all over the place. We do have one that's $4,800 a year, and that is for a department head, a grant. We have one that's $6,000 and change. We have some that are $9,000. I mean, so they range all over the place.
And you say we keep the car, on average, if we give them a car, that car we'll keep that car for?
Approximately 10 years. Now, that's looking at administrative use type vehicles, not something that's on the road serving papers and stuff like that. And we kind of base it off of one of the vehicles being driven by one of the affected individuals, and it's a 2009 vehicle, and it's still on the road. It's not scheduled to be replaced.
So, Sheriff, what is your preference?
I agree with the car allowance.
Okay, the 4,800.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Debbie. I didn't know this was going to be discussed, but as yesterday, I got to discuss it with a couple of you, is that I am pro the car allowance, but not at 4,800. I don't think that would, I'd prefer a car rather than 4,800, and I think the chiefs would too. I have an expectation of them to respond all over the county, and I don't know how the car, and I recognize she boiled that down. I know that I personally drive 1,500 to 2,000 miles a month all over the county. And I have that same expectation of each of these chiefs to do that, and that's who we're talking about.
What are the chiefs, what departments are the chiefs over that we're looking at here?
We've got chiefs over the jail, obviously, chiefs over training and courts, and we got chiefs over, the senior chief who is over operations, we've got chief over inmate services, and each of these chiefs have several facilities that they go to, and several facilities that they're at, plus we have operations out in the communities as well. That we do. That's just a few of them.
Because I'm looking at it in terms of miles and saying, okay, if we're at about 50 cents a mile, which we're a little over that, I think.
54.5.
Then that's about, that covers about 800 miles a month. You saying you're spending anywhere from 1,500
to 2,000.
2,000, but you're all over for everything.
Right.
And I guess I apologize for not having that letter in front of me. What kind of allowance are you asking for?
I was asking for the 692 allowance, and I don't have that in front of me either.
So that's about 8,400 a year.
Yes, sir.
That's a personal opinion. Now, we're not factoring in for the liability associated with driving a county car. And they're administrative vehicles, so that risk is a bit smaller. But at $6,900 a year per individual, that's going to exceed the cost of operating the vehicle. The two individuals we looked at, for instance, this current month, most recently completed month being July, I think their actual gasoline purchases were around $115.
Well, I appreciate that research. I would say there would be several variables flawed in that. We're both conservatives. I mean, if we have chiefs going to the same place, like Commissioner's Court this morning, everybody rode together. If we're going to send a party to Austin next month, and they're going to be there for a couple of days. Well, we're not all taking our own cars. We're trying to be conservative where we can, so that there's some months where it's hit and miss, and those type of things.
But doesn't that speak to a lower allowance versus a higher allowance?
Well, in some months, but not on others.
6 or 7, I mean, if you're putting 4 people in a car, 3 of them are getting the same allowance, but they're not driving.
Well, that's correct, sir. But I mean, in other instances, they're going to be by themselves. They're going to be dispatched to various and sundry things.
We did ask the sheriff's department if they could help us identify business miles, and it's just difficult.
It is. And I agree, that is. I mean, I would assume, for instance, you, Judge, are all over the county like I am and driving a lot of mileage. And, but the expectation of them is that I expect them, and have seen the various chiefs out at 2 o'clock in the morning on various incidents, and I expect them to get up and come, and whether it's they're driving across the county or wherever they're at. So there's a high expectation of it. But I think that what I'm saying is if you feel like 4,800 is a business model, then I look at these guys as a little bit more like first responders, and that I would say, let's go back to the car.
Okay, so let me ask this question. If they're first responders and they're going to be going, do you really want them going out in their own personal car, or do you want them showing up in a county car?
I show up in my own car. I don't have any problem with them showing up in either as far as their response, and they need necessary equipment or necessary things that they normally would need on those scenes.
And just a word about liability. Even if they're receiving a car allowance, if they're using their vehicle for county purposes, we still have some attachment back to a potential claim. It's just that we become secondary. Their insurance will be primary.
Absolutely.
Say that again.
They'll go to our, if I have a wreck today or you have a wreck, they're going to my insurance first. And then if somebody was suing us, it was your or my fault, and somebody was suing us, they would come to the county second.
Okay, what's y'all's feeling?
Now, let's just go the other two issues that they had pending. There was their intel director, the sheriff, when they created this position, came to the court with a recommendation that 36% of the salary would be charged to state forfeiture funds, so that in essence, with his plan that he brought to us, would be neutral, cost to the general fund. He's now asking for that to be absorbed by the general fund. And I think he also said in his presentation that he was going to ask for a reclassification for this position in the future. And nobody's diminishing the worth that you mentioned regarding the position. There was also a request for 4 pairs of night vision goggles. It's our understanding that the Sheriff's Department did apply for a grant for these through COG. They did not make the cut for this year's Homeland Security grant funding, but there's always next year. And there's also the potential that there'll be funds unused at the end of this granting year, and they are reallocated, redistributed to the other entities on the list.
And I know we also talked about forfeiture funds. What is the balance in your forfeiture fund account right now?
I think in our state fund is about $150,000, but we're negotiating over replacement of guns, and I'm not sure what that's going to end up costing by the end of the day.
And I didn't look at that, Sheriff, but you have about 3 or 4 forfeiture accounts. I know there's
That's
federal
correct.
also, so I don't know what's
Yeah,
in there.
there was one that we couldn't and one that we could, and I think we were trying to get clarification on one that we couldn't use, see if it's the same.
I thought we had resolved that, and the word that came back was that you could use the forfeiture funds for any of these things.
For the state.
State. For salaries, you can use state funds, and I think.
State.
I think.
And then the glasses could come out of any of the
Either.
funds.
Yes.
Possibly.
And let me just as a general term, and I'll say this to anybody that's got dedicated or funds from forfeitures or record fees or whatever it is, that I look at that as that we ought to use that as we can use it, because if we're not using it there, we're using taxpayer funds.
I don't.
And that's my goal is to use all of that stuff,
Right.
and then get around to taxpayer funds.
And philosophically, we don't disagree on that, and we have, there was, a wealth building in the past, but I haven't done that. We have spent a lot of those funds already, and we have some of them earmarked for other things, for instance, like the patrol rifle program, and some other less than lethal things that we want to do in the future. But we've got some of them that are earmarked for that we're doing the research on, and I mean, I saw armored cars up there. We're the largest agency in Texas that probably doesn't have an armored personnel car, and it only matters if you're being shot at, but it's pretty important then. And so we're looking at some other ways to do that. But we're trying to be very, very conservative in how we do that. Is that the concern is, especially on the state funds, is those forfeitures are not like they used to be. They seem to be dwindling, and if we keep him over in the state funds, then we might be back at mid-year saying we're out of money, and we need money for guns or we need money for something else in those limits. But I don't disagree with you. And my proposal that I made yesterday, by the way, that we talked about is if we did the 6 car allowances at $49,000, we did the eyeglasses at $52,000, and we did Grantham's salary at about $49,000, that's $151,000, and we do have budgeted over $150,000 in cars. We could take the cars that currently the chiefs have and push them out to the respective places that we need them. And so it was a wash as far as the monies in that arena.
And the only thing, I hear what you're saying there, but those vehicles will last us 10 years, and those allowances are going to be every year.
That is correct.
So
that is true.
So that's going to go from $50,000 to over 10 years. That'll be a $500,000 expense versus $152,000.
Sheriff, we didn't get to see the correspondence with you.
No, and I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. Tell me again what you just said.
It is that we had a little over $155,000 for vehicles, because I don't have the document in front of me either. And then, but the salary that we're requesting, the car allowances that we're requesting, and the glasses come up to $151. So it'll be a wash.
So, and I appreciate that. But just for the court's information, if we acquire vehicles, we acquire them out of non-debt capital. If we provide car allowances, that comes out of general fund. And so those are 2 different funding sources. So just for your information. So that's the problem.
Well, let me plead ignorance. I don't know what that means.
I'm sorry about that.
So if I'm looking over that list of things, which if we were, the first thing, I don't think, I'll speak for myself. I strongly support making sure we keep David. And where we pay for that is important to me, but the main important thing is that we keep him.
I agree.
So that could be paid for out of the state forfeiture fund. The glasses could be paid for out of the federal forfeiture fund from that perspective. And then the vehicles or the automobile allowance, I think that's just a matter of where our preference is from that standpoint. 4,800 may be too low. I really believe that 8,400 or very close to 8,400 is pretty high. Maybe splitting the difference in there, it's somewhere around 6,000 or 500 versus 400 a month on the automobile allowances would be kind of in the middle. I don't know what everybody else is thinking from that standpoint. Or maybe we go 550 and make it 6,600.
My preference has always been for vehicles, but I'll support whatever the court wants.
I support whatever the sheriff prefer, because you know your operation, you're in it every day.
Thank you.
What flexibility you need to carry out your mission effectively, then I believe we need to do what we can financially to support your goal. I don't know where the $151,000 is going to come from, but you just mentioned that you found an item in your budget that can basically offset.
Well, that's in non-capital.
That's not right.
That's not in general revenue.
So that's not doable, right?
Well, it's doable, but it's just remember that we're trading a one-time expense for
a
every year
recurring
expense.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So if the vehicles are for 10 years, we're trading 150 for 150 times 10.
Right.
Right.
And that's the thing, I mean, it's operational type stuff, and that's the thing. And that's not fair either, because the goggles will be a one-time expense.
Correct.
So that's not a true statement. It would be the 100,000 would be the one that's an operational type of a deal.
I just want to say that I support the sheriff as well, but we're the ones who are responsible for this budget and for keeping it as low as possible. To me, car allowances are not a good economic deal because it's a recurring expense year after year after year, like you said, Judge, compared to buying a car. Buying the cars is a whole lot more economical than providing car allowances. I support you, but I don't want to give you a blank check.
I understand. Well, we would, in circumstances like this, rather than going lower, we prefer the cars, rather than going below the 690. In my personal, that would be a burden on the chiefs, and I would go with the cars at that level.
So anything less than 690, you want to go for a car?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then we can retain the cars. That leaves the Grantham issue. And like I said, I'm concerned with the state funds to do that. That's the reason I brought him up. If we had plenty of money there, I'd be glad to continue that. But we are in negotiation, and we have to replace these rifles. And that may take more than 50% of that fund away from us, and we're not sure yet.
Why don't we, if y'all don't mind, why don't we put this off till next week?
I'm okay with that.
And that way we can look at that. I would like to have an idea of what amounts we have in all the funds.
Okay.
And I don't know about the rifles. I know I've heard that you had some, then we ended up having to take. Can you explain a little bit more exactly
Yes,
what
sir.
happened with the rifles?
We had several patrol and SWAT rifles bought back in 2016, and they were manufactured by the SIG manufacturer. They were brand new weapons. And at the time, probably thought at the top of it, there has been a catastrophic failure with those weapons where they misfire, they hang up, and we've had the manufacturer out several times, and we just can't come to an agreement that they need to be fixed or returned. And so we have now started the purchase process. We bought all those guns through forfeiture in the beginning, and they're going to be replaced. There's no guarantee of what we're going to do with those lame guns, so I don't know that we'll get any money out of them, but we're going through the process right now to rebid those weapons. And the weapon systems that we're probably selecting, we're going along with what, for instance, what has been successful with Arlington and Fort Worth and around the agencies where we've tested some of these guns. But the guns, these are $1,200 guns that we had, and we're going to $1,800 guns or so for some of the SWAT operations. So the price has gone up for what our needs are. And so we're replacing, I don't have that number in front of me, but probably close to 60 to 70 weapons.
Have you talked with our civil division, and why aren't we suing the heck out of this manufacturer?
We haven't done that yet, sir. We're getting, our priority was to get these weapons replaced, and then I'm certainly willing to address some of those.
Okay.
This may be one situation where low bid meeting specifications is not appropriate.
Well,
If they're malfunctioning, that doesn't sound to me. You're right. It may be because we had to take the low bid, but
SIG was not the low bid.
What?
Yeah. There's some other issues.
Okay. So hopefully we'll be able to recover that money, and that would then come.
I
wouldn't count on that.
I wouldn't count on it. Not anytime soon.
Okay.
Are these the same type rifles that Fort Worth SWAT's using?
We're looking at the same rifles that they're using
Okay.
and using a patrol, and by the way, Arlington's using, and we've tested that weapon, and it's actually, and by the way, a local manufacturer. It's a Tarrant County manufacturer who's done a really good job that we're looking seriously at. Because I think that they finished the test phase just probably in the last week or so.
And we're looking for 50 or 60 of those, right?
Maybe set up to 70, because we want to make sure that all patrol officers, the goal is to have all patrol officers have an issued firearm, and as well as the SWAT team and our warrant team.
Okay, so, then that means the only thing we've got left are these 3 items that we're talking about, which is the intelligence officer, the car allowances, and the night goggles.
Right.
Okay.
Now, if we could go ahead and just make a motion on items 1 through 10.
Move for approval. What?
Items 1 through 10 on this list.
Move for the approval of the item 1 through 10 adjustments on this list.
Oh, wait, did I misstate? Hold on.
You missed
I'm
it.
sorry, it's a little misleading. It's through, I'm sorry, it's number
1 through
11.
11.
Plus the adjustment in the road and bridge fund.
What she said.
Yeah.
Second.
Our motion is second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
We'll get you next week. Okay, we have Mr. Wright who wants to come up and talk about his backwards Texas tie.
He's walking like a cowboy.
It's not on the agenda, Your Honor.
Whether the star's on the left or the right depends on which way the wind's blowing. I do have an announcement, somewhat related, of vital importance. Today is National Bow Tie Day.
Okay.
And, first popularized by President Abraham Lincoln, who often wore them, for over 150 years. The bow tie has been a sign of superior intellect, refined taste, and bold character.
Especially when you know how to tie it to put the flag on the right side.
And I want to thank the gentlemen of Precinct 1 for keeping the spirit alive and celebrating this day and its importance to the American people. Thank you.
Superior
Glad to
intellect,
help.
huh?
Glad to help.
Okay, I'll make sure I tell Susan Wright that.
Roy and Roderick, both of y'all's looks like it's tied correctly. We have several audience participations. I believe they're all regarding gaming, and there's only one who wishes to address the court, and so I appreciate the rest of you kind of getting together and I guess delegating Rebecca Travis to be the speaker. So I'm going to ask Rebecca to come forward, and at the same time, note that Tabitha Williams, Deborah Jennings, and Aaron Wather, yeah, that sounds right, are here also to speak regarding this matter, or not to speak, but are here in support of, I believe, what Rebecca is going to say. So Rebecca, please come on down. As you're coming down, let me explain that by state law, we cannot respond to anything you say here today because it's not on the agenda. And what we will ask you to do is to present to Mr. Manius, who is missing in action, but will be back, I'm sure, very shortly. And he will see if we can help resolve what we can and can't do with regards to the issue you want to bring before us today.
Okay.
So if you'll give your name and address, then you're welcome to proceed.
And please pull that mic down so you can speak directly into it.
There we go. Okay, my name's Rebecca Travis, and I reside at 5705 Trail Lake Drive in Fort Worth. It's zip code 76133. It's part of the Wedgwood Addition. I first came and spoke to you back in January about the game room issue, and I want to say that game rooms are still alive and well in Tarrant County. They're still generating lots of income due to the fact that there are no enforceable regulations. And I would like you guys to set those regulations. I know it's not something that the Commissioners Court regularly does, but perhaps it's time to get a little uncomfortable in our job and think about setting those regulations. The City of Fort Worth would like regulations, and they can't set them. The City of Arlington would like regulations, and they can't set them. In May 26th of 2017, House Bill 3453 was passed, and that gave Tarrant County, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, the authority to regulate game rooms. You're only one of 11 counties in the state that can do it. I think the 10 other counties, as I've gone to their county websites and looked, have game room regulations. I think that, our crime is up in these areas. I know that there have been at least 3 armed robberies since I last talked to you, one of which was that one at Valentine's Day where there was a person shot in a game room that was being robbed. I think this is something that you guys can do to help protect our property values, help the safety of our neighborhoods. And it just kind of surprises me that in Tarrant County, we can regulate how tall somebody's grass can be, but we can't regulate where these rooms can be. I know the cities would do it if they could, just as they regulate the strip clubs, but they can't. Only you guys can do this. And so I just want to ask you guys to think about getting a little uncomfortable and look at that. I know that you're busy talking about budgets today. I know that in Harris County, the additional game rooms that are regulated by the Sheriff's Department, their revenue has increased because they keep all that money that they have taken in. They go into these game rooms, they rate them, they get thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they keep that money, and it becomes part of their budget. So maybe that can help you guys in the end. I don't know. I just wanted to say I'm not giving up the fight. I think that this is something important to do.
As we said, please talk with Mr. Manius, and it sounds like you've been here before. You've obviously been here before.
Yes, she has.
And did not resolve the issue. So if you do not get it resolved this time, then we will put it on the agenda, and we'll have an open discussion about this so that we can see about moving forward in some manner.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Travis, and we will get into this.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to recess our open meeting and proceed to close, discuss items exempt under Section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government. Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we're adjourned.